of our non-vehicle emissions. And the results won't just be emissions cuts. We will also promote transparency and emerging innovations and accelerate the use of efficient, clean technologies in the United States and around the world. Finally, I am proud to say that hours before I stepped on the plane to come here, I announced EPA's finalized endangerment finding that greenhouse gases pose a threat to our health and our welfare. That is a decision that has been a long time coming. In 2007, the United States Supreme Court handed down perhaps the most significant decision ever handed down in environmental law. The court ruled that the Clean Air Act, the landmark 1970 law aimed at protecting our air, is written to include greenhouse gas pollution. That verdict echoed what many scientists, policymakers, and concerned citizens have said for years. There simply are no more excuses for delay. Regrettably, there was continued delay. But this administration will not ignore science or the law any longer, nor will we avoid the responsibility we owe to our children and grandchildren. By taking action and finalizing the endangerment finding on greenhouse gas pollution, we have been authorized and obligated to take reasonable efforts to reduce greenhouse pollutants under the Clean Air Act. This long overdue finding cements 2009 placed in history as the year when the United States government began seriously addressing the challenges of greenhouse gas pollution and seizing the opportunities of clean energy reform. It will ensure that we take meaningful common sense steps and allow us to do what the Clean Air Act does best: reduce emissions for better health, drive technology innovation for a better economy, and protect the environment for a better future, all without placing an undue burden on the businesses that make up the better part of our economy. And when we return home, we will work closely with our Congress to pass comprehensive clean energy reform through the U.S. Congress, reform that will promote clean energy investments and lower U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by more than 80% below current levels by 2050. A strong program of reforms and incentives can help the markets get to work, making clean energy the profitable kind of energy. Once legislation is passed, we're betting on our entrepreneurs. We're betting on our innovators and on our workers to accelerate the pace of clean energy development in the United States and around the globe. Now we know that skeptics have and will continue to try and sow doubts about the science of climate change. These are the same tactics that have been used by defenders of the status quo for years. Those tactics only serve to delay and distract from the real work ahead, namely growing our clean energy economy and finding innovative, cost-effective ways to reduce harmful greenhouse gases. It's time that we let the science speak for itself. We have relied on decades of sound, peer-reviewed, extensively evaluated scientific data. That data came from around the world and from our own U.S. scientists. What it makes clear, beyond doubt, is that climate change is real and that now is the time to act. We are proud to join the hundreds of nations, the thousands of leading scientists, the tens of thousands of innovators, entrepreneurs, and private companies, millions of Americans, and billions of global citizens who have seen the overwhelming evidence and called for action on climate change. At a moment when urgent economic and environmental issues are pressing on us from all sides, President Obama has positioned the United States to lead the way. We are seeking robust engagement with all of our partners around the world. We are seeking to support sustainable economic opportunities in developing nations. We are seeking a path forward that rewards our mutual interests and recognizes our individual responsibilities. And we are seeking to prevent the rapid approach of climate change that affects us not as separate nations, but as one Earth. I'm very glad to be here with you today, and I look forward to our work together. Thank you very much. Uh, uh,
And if we might ask you all to please identify yourself by name and organization. Thank you.
Russell Mills from Dow Chemical. As you may know, we're a very strong supporter of market mechanisms, so we have been a vocal and public supporter of cap and trade systems. Your endangerment decision, how is that impacting the senators or others who are wavering in terms of their support for cap and trade in the U.S.?
Well, you have to talk about senators in terms of their individual support. What I do want to emphasize is that President Obama has called for legislation, comprehensive economy-wide legislation. I join him in calling for that legislation. This is not an either-or moment. This is a both-and moment. And in fact, the legislation that's been contemplated and debated so far uses the Clean Air Act in many ways to do those things that it does.
Next question.
My name is Ethan Buckner. I am from the Sierra Student Coalition and am one of over 500 American youth here in support of a strong international climate treaty. And I'd like to thank you first, Administrator Jackson, for your instrumental role in helping to pass the regulations on the endangerment finding, and also commend you for your strong support of the youth climate movement. So I'm wondering, the EPA's endangerment finding gives the Obama administration the mandate to regulate greenhouse gas emissions without congressional action. How will this ruling provide the Obama administration leeway to commit to stronger science-based emissions targets at Copenhagen?
The endangerment finding is the key to the Clean Air Act. If the Clean Air Act had a door and it had a key on it, the endangerment finding is what you need to legally authorize action under the Clean Air Act. Clean Air Act, which was passed by Congress. So it is the law by land. I want to talk a little bit more about the both-and scenario. We're not at either-or. We need legislation. We desperately need it so that the economy and business gets a strong signal once and for all that clean energy is the profitable energy, that the investments that are made there will sustain their business so that people can have jobs, so that our economy can be healthy. That's very important, never more important than now. I think it's important to understand that the Clean Air Act has for many, many years allowed reasonable, common sense steps to address air pollution. Now that greenhouse gases are, per the finding, air pollution, my commitment has always been that there are reasonable, common sense steps under the Clean Air Act that can be taken to complement legislative efforts.
Thank you. Next question.
Richard Cowan from Reuters. I could ask a two-part question. First, last night and this morning, Chinese officials were very critical of the U.S. offer that's on the table on carbon reduction targets. Can you respond to that? And also, your intentions under the regulations, under the endangerment finding, would you go ahead first with regulating autos or industry or simultaneous?
Sure. Well, it's easy to answer the first part because I'm not going to answer any questions or comment on negotiations as they go on. That's not my role here. And I know at 2:30, Jonathan Pershing will have his daily brief. And that's the place for your questions, any questions on negotiations. The second part was, will we rulemaking, and what will it be? Well, the fact is that EPA has already proposed the first greenhouse gas rules, emissions rules for our country. We proposed and finalized emissions reporting rules. Those are done. But the proposal that's out right now is for automobiles. And it's the automobile regulation that I mentioned in my speech. And the beauty of that moment, when President Obama stood in the Rose Garden surrounded by auto executives, labor unions, environmentalists, the states who had worked so hard for exactly that moment, was that everyone saw it as a win-win for the environment, for the economy, for jobs, for our sustainability. So